As I've covered a few times before on this channel, back in the PS2, GameCube, Xbox era, extreme sports were basically their own genre there for a while, and anything that reaches that sort of level of success is inevitably going to get someone who tries to figure out how to make that popular thing appeal to even more people. Today, I'm looking at an attempt to bring the extreme sports genre to kids. Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure. The vast majority of what you need to know is basically right in the title. What if you made a skating game in the style of other games popular at the time, but you stuck Disney characters in it instead of professional skaters? When the game starts, however, it seems to completely discard that premise in favor of its opening video having some sort of weird vibes where it almost seems like an ad for the game you're starting to play, where they're searching for kids to be in the game. This is very obviously supposed to be their version of the opening Tony Hawk video, but making it so explicitly a talent call is such a weird way to start a Disney game. It has Radio Disney vibes, I suppose, and it does, however, unintentionally do a great job of introducing you to the tonal whiplash that is so prominent throughout the entire experience you're going to have with this game. Once you make it to the main menu, you have your traditional character selection with a bunch of what seem to be at first really mixed up Disney characters. You have Woody and Buzz from Toy Story, Tarzan and Tantor from Tarzan, and Simba alongside Timon and Pumbaa as a single skater, together representing the Lion King. There are also some, I guess, going by the intro, real kids who are put into the game that feel kind of out of place, though maybe not as much as the Tarzan characters, which have aged kind of terribly, because I don't think many people remember that movie particularly well. Maybe I'm wrong, but I certainly haven't encountered the same fervor for it as I have basically any of the other Disney films from that era. There are also several unlockable characters, but they all come from just those three movies, like Zurg from Toy Story or Jane from Tarzan. It does feel real weird at first when you realize it's just those three movies that make up the entire character roster. It's all Disney stuff, it's not like they needed to license more properties. However, it turns out the gimmick here is that each set of characters gets their own set of themed levels. So, when you're playing as Toy Story characters, you play on the Toy Story levels. When you're playing the Tarzan characters, you play Tarzan levels. And when you're playing the Lion King characters, you play Lion King levels. There are also the aforementioned kids, which get their own single, more generic level that doesn't have anywhere near the same amount of charm that the Disney movie-themed ones do. What it does have, however, is the wildest product placement I can remember ever seeing in a game of this era, where you roll up to an in-game McDonald's and deliver actual McDonald's food to people in the level, for which you are rewarded by Ronald McDonald shoes. It would be a hilarious non sequitur in a comedy video game, and is just wildly out of place. The kid level also gives you an opportunity to play with a creative skater, which is quite a bit better than the really boring models than the default kid skaters here, that are again based off real kids. And I truly, fully don't understand the point if they're going to be so irrelevant here. You can do some real dumb stuff in the Creative Skater, like robot bodies and night vision goggles to just make the most absurd skater imaginable, and it's honestly a lot of fun in its own right. When I got down to actually playing the game, the most immediate impression I had was just that it was real slow. The first time I went for a grind on a pipe, I was immediately struck by how glacial it felt, and then a lip trick, which felt much the same. You could stay in those tricks for an incredibly long time with very little active involvement, and throughout the entire game, it feels like things have been slowed down pretty considerably when compared to its contemporaries in order to make things more doable by less skilled players. Mechanically, Disney Skate Adventure is solidly in the Tony Hawk 4 realm. There are no timers, you just run around a defined space and do all the objectives, quite a few of which are what you expect to see in this sort of game. Get high scores, collect the skate levels, but others that are kind of delightfully Disney in nature. What if you scared Scar from the Lion King off by grinding on this log that makes a boulder roll, or fought what's basically a boss fight of sorts against Zurg in Toy Story? It's also absolutely no mistake, this game feels so much like Tony Hawk 4, as Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure is actually using the engine that was used to produce that game. In fact, I found it pretty funny throughout my time playing the game. I often found myself having to think about whether something I didn't like about it was also something I didn't like about Tony Hawk 4 back in the day, or was something actually unique to this title. That being said, when compared to Tony Hawk 4, or really just about any other extreme sports contemporaries that were made for a wider audience, the game is not that difficult, and I was able to complete every goal I tried with ease. But I also honestly think that works in its favor. If it had been too hard, I don't think the core mechanics here are solid enough to make me stick with it. So it felt like it struck the right balance of breezy without feeling too horribly boring or tedious. The soundtrack, however, is absolutely dead on when it comes to the extreme sports genre. There are certainly some duds that I went and disabled in the menu, but for the most part, they chose some really great tracks that work really well with the game's vibe in the same way that Tony Hawk was so good at. The few tracks that kind of grate on me are ones that were clearly meant for a younger audience, so I was very thankful for the option to remove those entirely from the rotation. The songs do feel a little weird when contrasted to the Disney levels, but I got over that pretty quickly. I find myself thinking of this game in the same way as a lot of the better extreme sports games of the era that weren't one of the really well-known franchises. That is to say, is this game as good as a Tony Hawk or an SSX? No, absolutely not. Is it still a lot of fun if you approach it on its own terms, though? Absolutely it is. And as long as you go to this game with that in mind, and probably at least a little bit of nostalgia for this era of Disney animated films, there's the potential to have a lot of fun here. And despite my gripes about it, I absolutely did have a lot of fun. As to which platform you should choose, I would say that with this game, it generally doesn't matter a ton among the home console versions. They're all pretty similar. I don't think the graphics are particularly important for this game, but I will note that the Xbox version, which is what I played for all of this footage, does actually have full 720p support, which is pretty cool for this era, even if it likely results in more slowdown than exists on the other incarnations.